Here.
Here.
Yes. Present.
Present.
Here. Reverend McDowell, could you say
Yes,
a
sir.
word before we start, please?
Lord, in the midst of this busy time, and yet in the midst of your grace that surrounds each of us, we know that the time that we spend together here today might be beneficial, informative, and that again you might sensitize us to what those things are and what it means to this city of ours. Bless us in wondrous ways, allowing your grace to give us utterances that might be beneficial to this city. Bless those who are around this table individually and yet collectively, allowing each person to feel your touch and your grace. We ask it in the name of the Creator. Amen.
Mary, are you ready to get started?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we will begin our presentations with the first being the federal legislative update, Mr. Ralph Garbushian and Ms. Deborah Dehaney Howard with Capital Edge LLC. I know Deborah couldn't travel today, Ralph, so we're really excited to see you though, and I'm sure she's listening if she's able. So we say hi to her, and thanks for always having our back in DC and otherwise. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, and it's as always good to
Ralph,
be here
can
in Columbia.
we just have to adopt the agenda real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And we have an amendment as well. Do you have that one?
I've got the
Mr.
amendment.
Duval?
It's right here somewhere. Got it. Mr. Mayor, I move we adopt the agenda for the afternoon work session, adding to the agenda a discussion of negotiations answer to proposed contractual arrangement pursuant to SC Code 30-4-70A2 Legislative Affairs.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any other comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, seeing none. Madam Clerk, could you read the roll, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And now Ralph, thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, I apologize.
And I was just saying, it's always good to be here in Columbia. Always good to come down and visit and see things that are changing. And had some good meetings this morning with city staff. And I think really that's one of the most valuable parts of our visits is how much we learn from city staff on what they're working on and what their priorities are. So some good meetings. I promise this is this is much longer than any PowerPoint I've ever given you. I promise I'm not going to go through it in painstaking detail. But I do want to go through it and hit some highlights. And my defense is another client asked me recently, could you just throw us 2 slides on the Inflation Reduction Act? And my response was, no, I can't. That's not 2 slides that are useful in any way. But I will try to go through this quickly. So just a quick overview. I'm going to do a quick review of the 116th and 117th Congress, talk about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and I'll do that really quickly because I've spoken to you about that in the past, and we've sent a lot of information to the city on that. Spend some time on the Inflation Reduction Act, and then just do a quick update on FY 2023 appropriations and where we stand with that. In the 116th, 117th Congress, I was just chatting with your state lobby team. It was an extraordinary period of legislation, and that was largely a result of the pandemic and other crises we faced. But I don't think I remember a period of any 2 Congresses or even any 1 Congress that had, even in 2009, when Congress passed the Recovery Act, I think if you put it against these pieces of legislation, that pales in comparison. I think the Recovery Act was $900 million, if I recall correctly. So, right off the bat in 2020, we had the CARES Act, $2.2 trillion. Between the CARES Act and ARPA, I had to fit this on one slide, but there were the other pandemic relief bills, which were also very large. Then we had ARPA at 1.9 trillion, the infrastructure bill at 1.2 trillion. And then this summer, the CHIPS Act, 54.2 billion appropriated, and it authorizes another 280 billion. And then the Inflation Reduction Act, which is 490 billion in new spending and tax credits, and I think $760 billion in tax, in new revenue. So an extraordinary period of legislation, and I think the message here is I think that period is over. Regardless of how the elections go, I think it would be foolish to predict what the next Congress is going to do until after the elections, but I can confidently say that we're not going to see legislation of this scale in the 118th Congress. So really where that puts us is over the next 5 to 10 years, it's implementation of the infrastructure law and implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act. So I've gone over through this before, but just as a refresher, IIJA is really 3 bills wrapped into one. The first 3 divisions of that were the 5-year reauthorization of surface transportation programs that Congress was scheduled to do anyway. So that's the 5-year transportation bill. The rest of it is largely authorizations of other infrastructure investments. And then the important part is Division J. That's a 5-year advance appropriations bill for a lot of the other programs that are authorized in the bill, transportation and non-transportation. So just a quick overview of the surface transportation reauthorization. And just to put the 116th and 117th Congresses in perspective, in previous years when I talked about a surface transportation reauthorization bill, that was the main thing I talked to you about. I did a whole presentation just on that. I just have a couple of slides here on that, and that's largely because it's a status quo bill, apart from pretty significant increases in spending across all of the categories. And as with previous surface transportation reauthorization bills, most of the money will continue to be allocated by formula to state DOTs, to metropolitan planning organizations, transit agencies, and in this case, the big increase for intercity passenger rail and to Amtrak. That said, one of the things that sets the infrastructure bill apart from other reauthorization programs is how much funding there is for competitive surface transportation grant opportunities over the next 5 years. And these are all 5-year programs, and they all are funded every year, FY 2022 through FY 2026. And these are just some of them, kind of the big ones. And Columbia is, of course, familiar. We've submitted a mega grant application. We just submitted a railroad crossing elimination grant application and are preparing a CRISI application, all related to Assembly Street. So these are the FY 2022 funding notices for these programs are already out. And it won't be too long until we start seeing FY 2023 funding notices, and then in subsequent years.
Ralph?
Yeah.
The Washington Post had an article in it in the last few days about how different this particular bill was from previous bills in that it authorized the Secretary of Transportation to do some, that's the one?
That's the one. 28, so there's all the formula programs. It was a status quo bill in that respect. Most of the money still goes by formula to states, to MPOs, to transit agencies. But just by comparison, it's $28 billion a year, FY 2022 through FY 2026. I think pre-infrastructure law, if you took all of the competitive grant programs at DOT, maybe the secretary was making awards. I mean, RAISE is $1 billion, infra was $1 billion, maybe $4 or $5 billion. So this is a big, yes. The flip side of that, of course, is the United States is a big country, and $28 billion is.
And this is where we made the application for Assembly Street?
We applied to the MEGA program. We applied to the railroad grade crossing elimination, and then to another program, CRISI. So this is just some of the other competitive grant opportunities outside of DOT that's in the infrastructure bill. So for example, at the Department of Energy, there's $8.1 billion for smart grid and grid resilience, and DOE just actually put out an RFI asking how should we run these programs. There's an additional $1.5 billion for broadband over the next 5 years, And then, of course, there's about $60 billion total for broadband, but most of that $60 billion goes to the states. $42 billion of the $60 billion goes to the states. And the states are really in charge of how that money gets spent, but there are those other broadband programs. And then for your school districts, I included, there's the $5 billion EPA Clean School Bus Grant Program. A water and sewer, IIJA has a lot of money for water and sewer, but almost all of it goes directly through the state revolving loan funds. So Congress just put more money into the state revolving loan fund programs for water and sewer. And then on the energy and broadband, I mentioned there's the $42 billion for broadband. The states, DOE just put out the funding notice for grid resilience. That's going to go to the states. The one important one on here, and not many talk about it, but the Weatherization Assistance Program, it's an additional $3.5 billion over 5 years for that. That money goes to the states and then on to community action agencies. Off the top of my head, I think in a regular year, Congress provides about $100 million for weatherization. So that's a big infusion of money into the Weatherization Assistance.
Are those competitive grants as well?
No, it goes to the states by formula.
By formula?
And then it passes down to community action agencies.
So we would have to look to see what our formula would say.
Right,
Greater
in-
Columbia area.
And what your local community action agencies, what their
And that's
plans are.
for new roofs, new windows for
Exactly,
residential units.
right.
Okay.
I think it can even be used for HVAC.
Okay, wonderful.
Electrical upgrade.
I beg your pardon?
You can do electrical upgrade to
Yep.
help the energy
Right.
efficiency of the system.
So that's just a big infusion of money into that program. And then I think this is familiar to you. I won't spend much time in this, but this is just general strategy for competitive grants, and you all are familiar with this strategy. And I think did a really good job on pursuing the mega grant and the other grants for the Assembly Street project.
And Ralph, I think you were able to meet with Missy and Carol, our new grants.
Yes, just
person.
actually just
Yeah.
finished up 10
so
minutes ago.
I know we talked and they briefed you on the fact that this council also has allocated funding for additional
Yes.
efforts towards finding these grants. And so we'll need your help as well as usual. But
Absolutely.
that'll hopefully supplement that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and just anecdotally, a lot of the other cities we work with are also beefing up their grants, whether internally or hiring consultants.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a good time to be a grant writer or a grant administrator
That's true.
the next 5 to 10 years. And then and you all are aware of this, but the administration has their priorities for these competitive grants, and it's important to be aware of those as you apply. They just last week put out a community involvement guide. I kind of treat that as the teacher tells you, you might want to look at this before the test. I think that community involvement guide is something we'll want to look at before we submit future applications. This is just a quick overview, and you all are familiar with this, but I went over this, but we've submitted these 2 applications for Assembly Street, and we'll be submitting a CRISI application to the Federal Railroad Administration, I think in December. And then this is important. This is because so much of the infrastructure law goes, whether it's water and sewer, transportation as always, broadband, so much of the money goes by formula to the states, and the states are in the driver's seat to determine how those funds are spent. So it's really important for the city to be working with state agencies. And I think the time is now. For example, the Department of Homeland Security just put out the notice for the state and local cybersecurity grant program. So the state is right now, as we speak, developing their plan for the state and local cybersecurity grant program. And they have to, by law, involve local governments, but I think it's important to have a seat at the table as the state makes those decisions about those formula grants, because so much of the money goes directly to the states. And then the Inflation Reduction Act, this is just I guess if I had to do the Inflation Reduction Act in one slide, this is what I would do. It's $490 billion in new spending and tax cuts, and then $764 billion in savings and new revenue. And you all might remember the Build Back Better Act. That's the really huge bill the House passed last year. This is the final result. This is what they could get 51 votes for in the Senate. the most important part, I think, for local governments of the Inflation Reduction Act is it has a ton of tax incentives for renewable energy and clean energy. And Congress said these 13 specific tax credits are direct pay tax credits. That means that local governments and other tax exempt entities can claim that tax credit even though they have no tax liability. So to the extent the city has renewable or clean energy projects over the next 10 years, it's worth checking, is there a tax credit for that? Because chances are there are. I beg your pardon? They are?
Sellable.
Yep. Yep.
There's a big market for it too. I mean, like the advanced manufacturing production, all that, that's 2 cents for every kilowatt produced over a 10-year period. It's real money against future income if you bring in a partner to get this stuff done.
How about the hydro plant?
Hydro plant, well, we're applying for a DOE money on that. We've already met with their directors twice. I think we've had 2
Yes.
phone calls with them about that, and it's a historic, so it's something they're eyeing.
And that's from the Infrastructure Act, and DOE is getting set to put out the funding notice for those hydropower programs soon.
Like our solar field that we want to do at the water plant, the sewer plant, we haven't done yet. This is like getting a 30% tax credit. That's what they all did when they did the investment tax credit, and you can use that. It's sellable, tradable.
It absolutely is, and actually the Treasury just last week put out a RFI asking for how should we implement all of these various tax provisions, and one of them was specifically how should we implement this direct pay provision in the bill. So this is just what I was mentioning, allows local tax exempt entities, including local governments, to receive those tax credits as direct payments. And the Treasury is hard at work determining how they're going to set all of this up. This is an important, if you're familiar with a new markets tax credit, that's a tax credit for economic development that Treasury allocates. There's $2 billion in any given year, let's say, for tax credits, and Treasury allocates those competitively. The Inflation Reduction Act provides an additional 1.8 gigawatts of investment tax credits for solar and wind facilities that are small, less than 5 megawatts, placed in low-income communities, and that's 2 years, 2023 and 2024. So I think they'll set that up similar to New Markets tax credit, where those are allocated competitively, and that's a bonus. That's a 10% increase in the tax, 10 or 20% increase in the tax credit, depending on the kind of project it is. And IRA does include a few grant programs. There's $5 billion for climate pollution reduction grants. That'll be an EPA grant program. I think that's one that's better targeted to regions, even though local governments are eligible to apply. Despite its name, the Environmental and Climate Justice Block Grant is not really a block grant. It's a competitive grant program, and you need to partner with a community organization to apply for that one, but that's $3 billion. This is, if you're familiar with reconnecting communities in the infrastructure law, this is essentially reconnecting communities with a slightly different name, and there's $3.2 billion. That I just met with DOT staff last week, and one of the things they're determining is, are these programs similar enough that we can issue one funding notice, or are we going to have to do 2 funding notices? So stay tuned on that for that FY 2023 NOFO. This is a big part of the Inflation Reduction Act. EPA has 180 days to set up this program. Congress gave them a lot of leeway, but it's $27 billion for a greenhouse gas reduction fund, or what they really call in the media a green bank. And that's to encourage and make investments in low, moderate income communities that might not otherwise receive those kinds of investments. This is a pretty straight $1 billion for state and local governments to replace heavy-duty vehicles with clean versions of those heavy-duty vehicles, and those are 100% grants, no match. And then this is the Inflation Reduction Act has money, but it goes to the states, but it's essentially contractor training and building code adoption grants. But those will go to the states, and states will decide how and whether to share those with local governments. And then this is what's going to HUD in the Inflation Reduction Act. It's $837 million for HUD loans, grants, loan subsidies to improve energy and water efficiency and other environmental factors in HUD-assisted housing. This is an interesting slide, conservation grants. Oh, I'm sorry.
Did you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Reverend McDowell, did you have a question?
Yeah, I want to go back for just, if you would, just go back for just a minute.
Of course.
State-based grants. And that's used primarily for training and facilitation of, talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure, and this is a brand new program, but I think the goal there is to provide training, job training and education for designers and contractors on home energy and energy efficient techniques, building methods, products. And then the building code adoption is essentially technical assistance for state and local governments to adopt the latest energy efficient building codes.
All right.
But unfortunately, from where I stand, those go to the state. And it's really up to the states whether that to share those with cities.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Conservation grants, I highlight this because in any given year, Congress appropriates, I think, $30 million for urban and community forestry and $10 million for the Forest Legacy Program. So all of a sudden, the Forest Service is going to have $1.5 billion and $700 million for these two programs. They were so small before that they were hardly worth even looking at, but $1.5 billion for urban and community forestry is I think, worth looking at. And it'll be interesting to see what the Forest Service does with those funds.
Open trees, open spaces.
And then really quickly, that's about as quickly as one can go through the Inflation Reduction Act. We are now, it's October 18th, so we're 18 days into FY 2023. And we still do not have a final FY 2023 budget. Congress passed a continuing resolution that runs through December 16th. So they gave themselves some time after the election to pass a final budget. And we often hand this out. I've handed out our funding chart, and that's just our effort to track the appropriations process for programs that of interest to the city. I think the good news at the broadest level is that if you look at the House and Senate appropriations bills, most programs the city cares about are in good shape. CDBG, Homeland Security grants, Department of Justice grants are all set to receive equal or more funding next year. So
It's rare that you can come in and say that.
it is. And
Every year we have, so, they're gonna cut community development.
yeah, I think we're in good shape and combined with the infusion of money for a lot of those programs in the Inflation Reduction Act and IIJA, I think it's a good time for federal funding. I think the trick is setting priorities over those 5 years because there's so much, it's overwhelming. And happy to take any questions. I know that's a lot.
Quick question, Ralph, thanks for this information. Lots of plates spinning out there. You know, we're all separately, we volunteer on other, or we're appointed to other boards as city representatives. Tina and I have the pleasure of serving on the Comet Board, and you have offered up in the past to keep looking at intermodal funding, transportation, logistics, expansion funding. Is that something that the executive director, the future executive director, just needs to keep in touch with you on?
Absolutely,
To
yeah.
continue that?
And always happy to help out.
Okay.
And the good thing, I forget the number off the top of my head, but if you go back to the reauthorization, I think transit receives a pretty significant increase. And most federal transit money is formula funding. And the main source of formula funding for the Comet is the 5307 urbanized area formula grants.
Yeah.
They and every other transit agency is going to see a pretty big jump in their 5307 allocation over the next 5 years.
And hopefully there's some one-time capital improvement facility grants that we can chase as well.
There are, on the transit side, transit projects are eligible for most of those surface transportation grant programs. In terms of transit-specific grant programs, there's the bus and bus facilities discretionary, which is pretty self-explanatory what that funds. And the low or no emission bus grants, which again is pretty self-explanatory. And
What's
then
that facility kind of limits in funding usually if you are awarded?
They run the gamut. I'm thinking about last year's awards. I think they ran the gamut from $1 million, which I think is probably enough to buy a bus, to 30 million if you're building a new bus facility, either whether it's a transfer facility or a maintenance
30
facility.
Okay. Thanks, Ralph.
Well, for the programs out there that we ought to be looking at for our park system in Columbia, I mean, and Ms. Wilson, are we looking at grants, federal grant money for rehabilitation of parks and things like that?
We're always looking, yeah, for any opportunity. So we have a specific grant,
Or do we have any grant,
contract with.
have we identified any grant process with our consultants and stuff that we could look at for park lighting and safety and broadband and
Sure.
in general, I mean,
We can definitely continue to do that. We already had a consultant for Parks and Rec through the foundation, so they were already looking at those things. But I think through any of these opportunities, we need to look as well.
And the main, I mentioned the urban and community forestry program. That's kind of a one-time thing from the Inflation Reduction Act. In 2020, Congress passed the Great American Outdoors Act. And the important part of there's a lot of important parts of the Great American Outdoors Act, but from a city perspective, the important part there was it fully funded the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So in perpetuity, the Land and Water Conservation Fund is funded at $900 million a year. And half of that is for federal land, but half of it is for state and local assistance.
Ralph, if there was an opportunity to create, say, a state park within the city limits of Columbia, does it behoove us to jointly do something with the state, or do we do it alone, or do we support a state and go to the state?
I think anytime you're doing, federal agencies always love it when you're, doing regional, state, local, local regional cooperation. That's always going to be more appealing to federal agencies.
Now, Ms. Wilson, there's 200 acres above the zoo on the river that at some point I'd like for us to take a look at as maybe a grant application in conjunction with the state as a way to give ordinary folks and the working folks access to the river. But I would like to see it really done more as a state park because it would, it's easier for them to upkeep things than sometimes it is for us. But I just think that's something that we would want to begin to explore the opportunity toward.
And,
Okay.
and in South Carolina, the state agency is PRT that administers. Most of the state and local money goes by formula to the states. There is a competitive portion as well.
Right.
But PRT manages those federal funds. And what you just said, access to parks for ordinary working folks, that's very much a focus right now.
And it's be a great improvement for us as far as the drive into the entrance into the city, because it's the site's between the interstate and the river. I mean, it could be totally beautiful for
Right,
us
right.
and really something good, I think, for the working folks in Columbia.
All right, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's
Ralph,
good to see
thanks
you all.
as
Yeah,
always.
Thank you.
Next, continuing with the second presentation is the state legislative update. We have our team consisting of Mr. Kyle Michelle Law Firm LLC, Mr. Ed Givens, Fellowship Strategies LLC, and Mr. Warren Tompkins and Mr. Boyd Brown, Tompkins, Thompson, and Brown Governmental Affairs.
Thank you.
Hey, gentlemen.
Ms. Wilson, council, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. We are gathering the team around the microphone for our presentation. I'm gonna go through this fairly quickly because we really want to hear from council on thoughts on state government. So let's see if I can make this thing work. There we go. Kyle Michelle, Ed Givens, Warren Tompkins, Boyd Brown, for anyone. I don't know if this is being live broadcast or how it's streamed.
It is.
In any case,
But
we
you're on the mic, so they're gonna hear mostly you unless y'all switch off.
at the beginning.
Okay.
First of all, I think I would say on behalf of all of us, we, A, appreciate the opportunity to work for the city, B, enjoy working together, and C, as we'll talk about in a little bit, we've enjoyed a good year on the budget side, and that's always gratifying for us, just as lobbyists, to be able to see some successes like that. So let's go through this state state affairs review for this, for 2022, or maybe report, a little bit of both. This was the year of the budget. I had more clients in addition to the city of Columbia, but also the city of Columbia, where what you heard back from members was, this is a year we have money. You guys come to us with the things that you need funded. And so we had, I think in the end, by the time they announced the last BEA report in May, the total state budget surplus was a little below or a little above $3 billion. Sort of lost count because it just kept going up, up, up. The ARPA discretionary amount that the state had to spend was $2.49 billion. That does not include the ARPA money that went to the Department of Education, the ARPA money that went to other departments and agencies directly in South Carolina. So there was a tremendous amount of money that was allocated, spent, put into reserves, et cetera, by the state. With the city, and you guys have seen these, we worked to develop over a long period of time with a lot of input from a lot of city staff, some input from some council members, some input from us working, going back and forth with members at the legislature. This list of general projects, this and this are the general capital projects, which you guys have seen before, and you've got it there in front of you. And then these were the water and sewer projects for the ARPA water sewer money. This was, the water sewer projects were and broadband were primarily developed by Clint Shealy and his team. And then I'm not exactly sure who was working on the broadband side of that, but the city staff did a good job of putting these together. And then again, these are the budget priorities. So these were what we were working off of. Our work got kind of cut in half because the water sewer money all went over to the Rural Infrastructure Authority so all of the water sewer projects had to be bundled and applied to the Rural Infrastructure Authority. That deadline was September 12th. They'll announce the grants in the first quarter of 2023 for that money.
They also have a bank of funding for loans.
Right. With this,
Big bank. of money for
they have funding for loans. Yes, Mayor, that's exactly right.
20% money or something, I think is what I heard.
And that money was not that low-interest money was not as attractive until inflation started making low-interest money hard to find. So that, and as Ralph knows, that's state money as well in that SRF fund. So in addition to these budget priorities, we had legislative priorities. This was the January 18th presentation that we did here at the beginning of the year. These were the issues that we were tracking for the city from feedback from staff, from feedback from Chief Holbrook, from feedback from council. This is what was laid out if you go back and look in the January 2022 legislative, last time we were before you. Property tax reform, which actually the speaker mentioned 2 weeks ago in a meeting I was at the legislature. So there may be some pressure coming to bear on on actually taking a look at Act 388, which has been sort of a third rail for the last 10 or 12 years. Gun violence measures, obviously. The others you see up here. And then this is the second part of them. I think there's 11 of them total. So these were what we were watching at the beginning of the session for the interest of the city. Every time you go through a legislative session, new issues come up, new bills get introduced. So this wasn't all we did. We also were taking care of things as they arose during the session. The results on the budget side, going back to the money now, was the local government fund. That was our allocation this year. It was funded per the changes to the local government fund law that were made a few years ago, which is now funded automatically up to 5% if the budget goes, it's funded at the same amount that the budget increases up to 5%. So our local government fund for this current year increased by 5% over last year, the City of Columbia's allocation. You see the large projects here that I was talking about earlier. $20 million for the Assembly Street Railroad separation or grade separation project. The Williams Street project of $9 million, $1 million for Finley Park, and $1.5 million from the City of Columbia Greenway. That's all new money. In addition to that, the $9 million that was appropriated in 2021 for the convention center was moved over to these three other projects this year. All total, that's, I believe, $40.5 million. It might be, let's see, 20, 30, $40.5 million. If you take out the $9 million, it's $31.5 million. If we've got an analysis of this that I don't have at my fingertips right now, and I did put in this PowerPoint. City of Columbia received more money than any other local government in the state by a long shot. I don't think there was any other I think there were only 2 other local governments that got more than $15 million. Most of them were sub $10 million. Even if you take out the convention center funds, we were over $30 million. No one got over $30 million other than us. So it was a good year.
If I could add to that, two of the projects that were large sums were ocean and stormwater management projects at the City of Myrtle Beach and the City of North Myrtle Beach. So those kind of go hand in hand with some federal funds that they had received.
Here's a copy for y'all. What Kyle was referring to, it sort of gives you an idea of what happened in the Midlands and then what happened in other areas of the state.
So as you're thumbing through that fairly tedious information, of the projects here that are listed, the $3 million for Belvedere flood mitigation, that was a priority of one of our delegation. That was the only project that was not one of the ones that was back up here on this list. This one.
Not included in this.
Well, that's not true.
Is it included in that, Kyle, or what?
Railroad wasn't included in the list, and the Bluff Road, the Atlas area
they're on there.
That was a separate line as well.
No,
That the 4 million that's the 4 million for the state farmers market.
no,
That came out of the 9 million
it's
that was
on here.
reallocated.
Let's-
We had the 9 million, and they took the 9 million and reallocated it.
It was called Congaree Commons on the list.
Right.
It's the fourth or fifth one down, the fifth one down. It was called Congaree Commons on the list that on this list right
What I'm
here.
saying is the 4 million that got designated out of that is for the farmers market. It wasn't for the assisted living project that we were working towards. Just want to clarify what's what.
Well, I think by the time the list was compiled, Mayor, the different discussions that occurred, and I think that's what they're getting at with the members of the delegation who were supporting the various projects, maybe in their original form, but the way we were directed to include it on this list was for healthy living and accessible food focus. So yeah. And then we also had the Assembly Street roadway rehabilitation and safety enhancements, the first phase on here as well, which obviously the railroad relocation came out of, is a complementary project.
I'm looking for.
Yes, sir.
May I? Cal, you mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, just a moment ago, the $3 million for Belvedere. Is that included on the list, or where are we with it? I know where we are with it, but is it included on the list?
Belvedere was funded, yes.
It's funded, that's correct.
Yes, it was funded. It was not on one of our original requests It was not one of our original requests. It wasn't on the list that we sent them.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Councilman McDowell, what happened on that was when we went to see Chairman Leon Howard on help with some of this stuff, he said this is something he wanted done, and that's where that originated, when it then ultimately became part of what we were working on.
Okay, sounds good. Just wanted to make sure we were on the same.
And hopefully
paper.
that
Thank you.
project's moving forward, so
Yes,
that's
sir.
very helpful.
And that's a good point that makes our job fun and complicated, which is a lot of times the state budget work is kind of a push me, pull you between what the city says, this is what we would like to get funded, and the members say, well, you know, I've got a higher priority, and so I'd like to do something different. And so we kind of have to work back and forth with them, and a lot of times, as you guys know, that involves a lot of meetings and a lot of discussion. And sometimes we end up with those final budget amounts being closer to what we had originally proposed, and sometimes they're a little closer to what members had wanted. So that's part of everything that we manage. Okay, so those are the results on the budget side. On the policy side,
Kyle, go back one slide. What's the 2 million for the Beltline Boulevard community?
That's
Is
for
that
the
another?
community center, you know, where we own the property between,
Oh, yeah, okay.
Bayberry News and North Point, which we hope to go ahead and start clearing that.
And Leon asked for the 3. Who asked for the 2?
Todd.
Representative Rutherford.
Todd.
any more questions on this?
Thanks.
Okay, and I have to say, this is on the policy side of things, so back to those 11 policy issues, there just wasn't a whole lot of things that came up this year that had a lot of peril for the city or a lot of opportunity for great advancement for the city. The mayor was very effective in advocating on affordable housing, and Chief Holbrook was there to talk on rehiring public safety officials and a few other things this year. But in the end, we were watching and working on and talking to people about the mask mandate, because we didn't want the mask mandate to do something that would impact negatively what the city had done, and we worked closely with them to pass that. That's a little bit of defense on that too. I put it under offense. There's a little defense on that too, to make sure that we weren't significantly negatively impacted by the mask mandate bill that passed. The affordable housing bill did pass. It didn't receive as many credits as a lot of people. The state credit limit was at $20 million. A lot of people wanted more than that, but we got it passed and got the program back on stable footing. Rehiring public safety officials, which has been a high priority for the chief, high priority for the council, mayor. We got that bill through, I believe we got it through the Senate, but we did not get it through the House. It does have a provision in it that says that if the retired PORS employee, police officer retirement system employee, is designated as a critical job, is being rehired for a critical job, that they can come back to work immediately with no break in service and be paid up to $50,000 a year. As you all know, right now, if someone retires, they have to take a 1-year break in service before they can come back, and then there's a limitation on how much they can be paid. 10,000. So we're trying, so we made some progress on that bill, and hopefully with all the focus on crime, not just here in Columbia, but also across the state and the country, we'll be able to get that bill through to the finish line this next year. As you can imagine, that kind of a provision always brings up a lot of red lights from the retirement system. Because the retirement system says if you let them retire and come back to work immediately, it's going to be a run on the system that will not be good for the financial stability of the system. So we've been working through that for a few years. On the defense side, this first 2 years ago started with a big push to raise the tort claim limits, and from the $600,000 that they are today. Ms. Knox can tell you what the tort claims limits means to the city of Columbia and our budget. In the end, nothing passed. There was a bill to limit stormwater rates to being no more than the property tax for any property that has stormwater, pays stormwater rates. That bill did not pass. There was a bill that would take away the city's ability to have any tree ordinance restrictions whatsoever that had some legs for a while in the House. That bill did not pass.
Who was, what industry was that? Was that the utilities?
The tree ordinance?
Yeah.
No, the tree ordinance came out of, I think it came out of Mr. Hewitt out of Myrtle Beach, who is in property and development. From one of his, it might have been a different, it might not have been Mr. Hewitt. I don't want to
But it
peg him if it was, it
wasn't
might have been
Dominion or
Mr.
Duke.
Jordan. I'm sorry?
Is it related to the
No.
Sullivan's Island issue?
No, no, it was at Myrtle Beach, but it jumped up and got through committee and was on the House floor. And the same with the, in these things about stormwater rates, a bill like that came out of the upstate, out of Pickens County. If you don't hurry up there and explain to people that this is a really bad idea, because we have a lot of property in our city that doesn't pay any property taxes. And if we've got somebody located on that city and we can't assess them stormwater rates because they don't pay any property taxes, that's not good for the stability of everything we're trying to keep going forward. Am I talking too much? No. Okay. Is there a question? Okay. All right. In the age of Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, and Hulu Plus, I thought I would throw on here State Government Plus. So we don't just do the budget and the bills, but we work on these other items that I'll let you read through. These keep us in touch with staff throughout the year. One of which we'll address in just a minute, which is the reception, legislative reception. So we're kind of constantly all, as a team, working back and forth with the different city staff. We get questions from you guys about bills. What's the status of this bill? I heard someone introduce this. We're happy to find that information out and pass it back to you. And that's part of what we do all year long.
Kyle, how do we make that easier so that I don't have to find out after a vote at the House that our delegation voted for something like ankle monitoring counting against time served? How do we get that information before that so that we're not having to go beg somebody at the Senate side to kill it? Because what I've discovered is a lot of people don't even read what they're voting on. And I'm trying to be nice about it, but that's a major bill that our sheriff, our police department, all of our guys were completely unglued about. And, it happened after the fact. How do we get that information ahead of time so that we can make sure that we reach out to people and tell them that we're really concerned about these type of issues?
I think the answer on that particular bill was, or I guess what I would say on that particular bill was, that surprised a lot of people. Right after that vote was taken, I was out in the lobby. I think everybody was up there that day. It was a busy
Thursday
day.
afternoon, right before they go to cocktail hour.
And Ryan McCabe walked out and he said, "Gosh, I think some people just don't read this legislation." And I said, "You talking? What did you guys just vote on? Because when you're in the lobby, you can't keep up with the blow by blow." And he said, "Well, it's this ankle monitoring thing, and all but 8 of us voted in favor of it." And he said, "I just don't think we knew what we were voting for." And so it turns out he was right. I don't remember who the sponsor was, but there was a herd mentality. But the bill, after that came to light, and after so many people raised so much awareness of it, that bill came to a halt. And I don't remember what the House did, but I know it didn't go any farther after that vote.
Well, I think it got killed at the Senate.
Maybe it got killed in the Senate. So, but it's really hard. It's really hard for us to know about every single thing before it happens. Just no different than being in city government. What I would like to explore, though, is how do we have a better communication system among all of us, because we're all so busy and we all have so many ways that we go for things quickly that to report on when they do happen, or that we can have feedback among each other. And I don't want to dominate this conversation, but I would love to hear from.
It's not a conversation, but it's something for food for thought as we talk about priorities and policies, because those are the type of ones that are very critical for us, especially.
If we know those are the priorities, it's easier for us to work with municipal association
work with like Sheriff's Association, the other law enforcement entities, to see where they are, and they are actively concentrating on those specific items and not all the rest of the other things that are going on. So it would help us coordinate with them to know when they needed some backstop that we can get involved and try to help them.
And Mayor, we have monitoring systems in our office, and Kyle and Ed do too. I mean, y'all let us, when y'all define your priority list this year, get them to us, as they file legislation, we can have those monitoring services check those boxes, and then we get updates on any bill that's gonna have a committee hearing set, subcommittee hearing set, all that stuff, so we can keep track.
I think some of it may not be priority stuff, but stuff that if something
any-
comes up, you know, hot button issues that we need to know about like that.
Well, as
That's a big
services
deal.
council and you, I mean, any of, and administration, any of y'all have something y'all want us to watch or flag, we're happy to do that.
Okay, so, on that note, we would, love to hear from council to help set priorities for next year, to get a sense of the policy items that you guys have. And then I would also like to, propose 3 different dates for our reception. And we don't usually do it in this forum, but it's October now, and we're running a little bit later than we should have. And so, January 24th, January 31st, or February 1st. January 24th, January 31st, or February 1st are all dates that right now, as of today, only one other organization has a reception plan.
One more time, Kyle.
January 24th, January 31st, and February 1st. And I guess what I would love to know is like number 1, number 2, number 3, because as of this morning, these 3 dates have only one other person, one other organization that has scheduled.
What
They-
date is that?
No, all 3 of them. All dates for the entire year have one other organization that is scheduled. There's no date open that doesn't have one. Some of them already have 2, others have 3. You don't want to be more than 2. You don't want to be number 3. Number 3 doesn't get listed in the journal. It gets listed on the calendar. It's hard to explain the difference. It doesn't get put in the journal. So
We expect a better turnout this year than we had last year.
we had the best turnout that we've had since I've been working with the city of
Still
Columbia.
doesn't mean it was good.
It was not great, but it's a
Hey,
lot
I
better
just
than it
wanna
has
be
been.
Clear, don't be proud of that. I mean,
No,
Councilman, earlier in the session you do events, the more likely you're gonna have a higher participation.
I was talking about of our own delegation.
That
County
part,
delegation.
that part was, I'll be honest, was a little disappointing, especially since half of them were right next door. And I hope that, you know, as we continue to reach out to them and communicate with them, that, you know, it is important that they support us as well. And we need to have that conversation, because when you got, I think, 4 of them next door at Hall's eating dinner, it was not a good thing for us, especially when their colleagues were telling us that they were over there.
We're talking about our county delegation.
But I'm with y'all. The earlier date to me would be better than waiting.
We can call, yes, I'll call over there.
You like that number?
24th,
Birthday? That's Ed's birthday, so of course we can have a big cake and everything.
and if somebody has jumped in front of us just through today, can I go for the 31st?
Yeah,
Okay,
I think getting it in January is to our advantage at this point.
I agree.
Cal, if you would, I know we're sort of locked in on a date, hopefully we can lock in on a date. But if you look at bullet number 5, under State Government Plus, submitting to council members for state, submitting, dig into that a little bit, if you would. Number 5. From time to time, Boyd, Warren, Ed will hear, me sometimes, will hear that the governor is looking for someone to serve on a board that fits these criteria.
And so this year, we had an opportunity to assist Ms. Bustles onto the opioid recovery task force, for which she was uniquely qualified, and which I believe she's serving as the vice chair of now, or the chair. And so that was something that we worked on. You know, another thing, just outside of the back and forth of working with legislators on bills.
How do we get that out? How do we get that word out? Do we get out from the team, or do we get out from Walmart? I mean, how does that work?
Well, it was, what they were looking for was someone with public health background who was also, they're looking for somebody with
I
a,
got these two sidebars over here. Say again, Carol.
they were looking for someone with a public health background who also had some government experience. And so that.
Let me have this one, please.
That's sort of
Let me get
like.
this one.
No.
That gave us something to point at.
Kyle, you
Said
see,
no.
you see how they are? Let's, if you would, Kyle, go into the weeds on that. Thank you, sir. With no interruptions. Thank you.
In this case, when the governor's office called, actually, it was the municipal association. The municipal association called and said the governor's office is looking for someone who's serving in local government who has a public health background, health care or public health background to serve on this opioid task force. And in fact, I think now, thinking back on it, the municipal association got to appoint someone to the board. And so Ms. Bustles was one. We submitted Ms. Bustles' name after talking to her that she would be willing to do it. And so
He wants to be
they
on
were
the
able to
barber commission.
Do you have a commission? Do you have a commission where the mayor talks too much?
He would like to have that concretized.
If we could form a commission that will synchronize the mayor's conversation and what we're talking about, I'm all for it. But for right now, let's look at that bullet point that I asked you about. Thank you,
about
sir.
number 5.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
And you can concretize that, yes, sir.
The other thing, if some of us, Ed, or others, want to serve on a commission, pick out the commission you want to serve on, see what kind of criteria it has, and tell them you're interested in it.
How many commissions are in the state government?
Well, the problem you run into is dual office. So it's gotta be a certain commission looking for a city
For a
official.
vacancy, for a vacancy.
It'd be like it's more like special study committees and stuff like that. 'Cause otherwise you do run into the dual office holding.
Well, I would,
Well, the bottom line, of course, is just making sure that word gets out. I'm not particularly interested in that. I want to make that clear. But there may be others who are interested and need that kind of criteria.
Yeah, well, we can do, the governor's office, their boards and commissions, they have an office for boards and commissions. And they run, and the Secretary of State's office, they keep a list of all the vacancies of all the boards and commissions and when seats are coming up. We can get you put on some sort of list where you're notified, and anybody on the council notified to get people from this area active on those boards and commissions if that answers.
But that's my point, just making sure all of us have that kind of information. Yes, sir. Thank you, Captain.
Kyle, I guess we can move into the priorities portion of this presentation, if that works for you. To echo Councilman Taylor's comments when Ralph was up there, parks and recreation outlets for funding, small, big, you know, whether it's a new swing set, whether it's a upgrade to a long deferred maintenance facility we have at a park. That's something I'd really like us to really push. And I know that comes from our delegation initiating that with the PRT, whatever that funding source is, I think through the I forget the name of it. But just really being on the offense, going out and finding more, getting ahead of maybe some other counties and municipalities for that funding.
Well,
If you would, add, if you ought to put your specific request on your earmark list, so that we can then go get a member of the delegation to submit that request.
And this isn't, I mean, hopefully this wouldn't be particular surplus funding. This is getting,
If you look at that
Yeah.
list and throughout the budget, there are a lot of requests and a lot of fulfilled requests for small things like parks and little local projects in a lot of the.
Perfect.
And
Thank-
then PRT they get funds for things like that also. We just have to figure
Right,
out how to
exactly.
get access to their appropriated funds. But generally, when they get an appropriation line with all those things in it, they've already got their list has been submitted. They know who they.
years down the road, yeah.
Well,
Perfect.
And let me mention this, that just today, in fact, I had a discussion with John Scott about a project that Henry and I have been working on for, Mr. Simons, I should say, and I have been working on for, gosh, a year or so now, because there are DNR funds, DNR recreation funds for Richland County that are for recreation that touches state waters. So we have a I'll let him explain exactly what it is, a river access project. And that fund has a substantial amount of money in it right now. We're trying to get funding for the city to build a river access point on the Saluda River. I believe it's up near near the rapids, above the zoo.
Oh, the step in, okay, yeah, gotcha.
Right, so we're working on that, but I know that there's a lot of other things like that. But we'll see what we can find out about the other sort of funds like that the county delegation directs for the state. That's the one that came to our attention.
Okay, thanks.
Kyle, I think the other thing that we want to make sure that we're addressing is the ability to work with the legislature to get the levels of fines up for littering and everything that we tried to before. And this year, it's very important as we look across the structure. If it's littering, we had a laundry list of things that we wanted to see and working with them. So that's going to be one of the things that we want to look at.
Good. Keep that feedback coming.
So we've met with Representative Finley about some of the Department of Mental Health stuff in response to a growing need in the capital city and the concern around homelessness. And one of the things that we'd like for you all to assist us with is building an infrastructure after 5 p.m. There is no services available after 5 p.m. Everybody works kind of the banking hours, which results in our business districts, our entertainment districts really having no path to getting folks into the services that they need. And a lot of that falls with the Department of Mental Health in terms of the hours that they're working and a shortage that they may be experiencing. So that's one thing. And then the second thing I wanted to mention was, in general, I think that there is a interest on this council in terms of beautification and appearance. And given that a lot of our roads are owned by DOT, that is going to be something that I certainly will be pushing, that I'd like to see, especially the major roads and downtown neighborhoods, really be repaved and cleaned up because it's long overdue.
Let me add to that, since I've been working with the DOT Commission in the county, one of the things that was brought to our light was that the state has not designated maintenance money for our roads. Everything's being directed to the interstate. Well, 71% of the 492 miles of roads in our community are owned by them. So it is something we need to talk to them about, especially when it comes to appropriations, putting money. Now, they've done a test project from UG Street all the way up Gervais to Millwood. And they're doing one in the county, which is Killian Road all the way, I can't remember what the crossroad is, maybe Long Ponds Road or something, with street sweeping, paving, cleaning, and et cetera. So we know they have the capability of doing it. We need to just make sure that we legislatively get them funded, because all the funding is going to the highway cleanup and maintenance fund.
What I suggest on your beautification of the entrance and pointways into the city, determine which ones that you like, and let's try to come up with a budget, and then let's try to get that money inserted in DOT's budget, and with a proviso that requires them to spend the money to do that. Otherwise, going and trying to get money from DOT is like trying to work with the railroads. You know, they're not the most cooperative people in the world. They've got their priorities. So if we I guess what we're saying is all these ideas you have, flesh out a program, have a funding request to go with it. We'll go try to find the appropriate place to put it to get money, or have instructions written and provided by the legislature to instruct the agency to do what you want done.
I have a question on affordable housing. I see that we had a dollar amount, 6 million that we were looking for. And I want to know how realistic it is to get a dollar amount allocated to affordable housing since they are funding the state housing, program.
I could speak to that.
Okay.
When you look at the budget under state housing, it's zero state dollars, it's all federal dollars. State Housing Finance Administration basically administers the federal dollars from HUD that come to the state. The low-income housing tax credit program that the mayor was speaking on last year is a federal program that allocates federal tax credits to programs, to the developments that are accepted.
Right, I'm familiar.
The state now has a matching state credit program, so they don't allocate any dollars to it, they just allocate credits to it, the lack of dollars coming in. So there are no dollars there at state housing for different affordable housing projects or developments around the state. Their only tool are those credits.
No, and that's what I wanted to.
Federal grants.
Okay.
Maybe
That's
federal
what-
grants.
Okay. No, I was going to say, I just want to know, do we need to continue to have that on the list or look on the policy? Well, and I also want to look on the policy side, revisiting inclusionary housing. But I'm just wondering, do we need to keep the 6 million?
Is the
Cash
6
money
million
list.
for a particular development, or is it for affordable housing in general?
I don't, it was here before I got here, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Where are you looking at that?
But inclusionary zoning is
Oh, on
an
the
issue
backside, yeah,
that has
we
come
just-
up. The legislature,
It is for some specific projects, actually,
Okay,
that we could tell them.
okay. We'll work on that. Don't worry about this.
okay, yeah, inclusionary zoning's come up every year for the last several years as pressures rise on, rents and housing affordability. That I'm sure that there will be a bill or two introduced on that. Again, the bills so far just give local governments the authority to require inclusionary zoning. So far, those have been defeated by the property rights interests who don't want anybody, they don't want any
their
more
money.
restrictions on property rights. But there are things that we can talk about at the local government level that other people may be doing.
Kyle and group, there's a group committee in the city of Columbia that's working on automatic traffic safety devices. We used to be calling them red light cameras. The cities do not have the authority to use cameras in enforcing safety. We have had a meeting last week, and there's a committee in Charleston, Greenville, Spartanburg, Camden, and I think Augusta, North Augusta, that is also trying to do the same thing. And we are using Senator Harpootlian's bill that went in 2 years ago. We are marking it up, changing the wording, changing some of the authority in it. But I think that piece of legislation will be something that this council will endorse as we get it firmed up. And the mayor's legislative aide was attending the meeting and had a lot of good ideas on how to move this thing forward. So we'll bring that to y'all when we.
Part of it was looking at traffic calming through speed cameras. And looking at civil fines versus criminal fines. It's kind of interesting that the pushback that has been for that, considering we got license plate readers, we got cameras on every corner, everywhere, so information's already being gathered, so I'm not quite sure what the holdup, but it has proven to reduce red light crashes, slow down in school zones, and to be quite honest, average crash takes about 2 hours of an officer's time, and if we could eliminate that.
I think it's just some education needed on the byway legislators. They got the Ridgeland court case.
Case in their head, yep.
And we just gotta educate them. This is, we're not.
We're changing the name of it. It's not gonna be red light running anymore, speeding is.
We did
Traffic
did a pilot test with some equipment, and it was very interesting to see what was out there, and how much, especially in some pretty high residential areas, especially around school zones. Yeah, and then Mr. Taylor.
Mayor, how doable would it be for you got a group of folks, I met with the mayor and of course several others referencing this. How doable is it for us to get together?
Very.
So that, because there is some data that is available from a trial run. And the trial run sort of gave some real indications, particular specific roads that were monitored. So it would be good, I mean, you got a committee over here and a committee over here. It would certainly be good if those two groups could sort of get together.
We will marry the groups.
Yeah, I want you to marry them.
Was the municipal association not involved with those groups?
I have not involved the municipal association yet, but I think when we get the different cities together, the first thing we need to do is go to the municipal association, association of counties, and get their support on.
It would help if that was a priority, one of their priority actions.
Yeah,
So can we make that happen, Howard?
yeah. Okay. I don't know who your group is.
Yeah, well, you and I talked about that.
My other sort of reflection on that is that there's a pretty good deal of confidence right now in the Secretary of Transportation and Department of Transportation. And I think that if legislation had some element of Department of Transportation sort of certification, in other words, Department of Transportation conducted a study and the Department of Transportation says that this is an area where traffic calming is needed. The Department of Transportation has some role in saying, yes, this would be good here. It may increase the chances of that.
Keep in mind, Howard, that might be a 2-year project.
Yeah, at least.
At least.
And let me hasten to add right here, Councilman Taylor, real fast. You can't understate, or you can't overstate how much our legislature is very hesitant of giving local government too much power, as you well know.
I would be shocked.
That's why I said, excuse me for interrupting, Councilman.
A couple of holistic things and a couple of specifics, because I want to make sure we do capture them and our city attorney can give you the information. I mean, we're very serious on looking at how we can raise the municipal fines to a level. They haven't been adjusted in decades maybe for inflation or anything, and we're held at limits today that I don't know, frankly, how much they stop people from bad behavior. And so we need the ability, and I think that's something, I think three of these are things that we can join together with other cities where it's not just a Columbia deal. So that one is raising municipal fines ability. The second, and Dr. Bustles mentioned it a minute ago, and that's a statewide issue, especially in the urban areas, is mental health. All the money that we had and surpluses this past year, none got committed to mental health, and that is a huge issue in these major urban environments that we have. There was pre-pandemic or pre-COVID, there was something done for 4 cities, and we need to look at that. And frankly, I would tell you again, whether it's through the municipal association or whether it's just the Greenvilles, Charlestons, Spartanburgs, Florences, Sumters coming together. We need more things like the state hospital to be increased. I mean, we're seeing this really and truly in Columbia where families on these chronic unsheltered homeless, families can't take care of these folks. And they don't respond well to shelters. I mean, we just gonna have to, as a state and as a government, bring some of that back.
That's been a 30-year problem, ever since Vern Smith and Pat Hammond left the legislature.
I know, but again, I really don't think that the General Assembly is hearing it from the bigger cities that, hey, guys, we got a real issue here. It affects our law enforcement ability, it affects the quality of life, it affects the quality of life for the citizens and for the individuals with the issues. Third thing is we will have special legislation. I don't want us to get through this discussion without being reminded that if we can move our tax modernization program forward between now and the General Assembly, we will have special legislation that we'll be asking for, and we probably need to go ahead and begin with working with the mayor and Dr. Gunlox and the county and Chairman Walker on exactly what that's going to be, because I suspect that will be our number one priority going into the General Assembly as far as legislation goes. Specifically, let's remember, we did not get all the funding that we asked for the railroad. We were $15 million light there. That has to be a serious priority. Senator Harpootlian is committed to getting the money for Phase 2 for the quiet zones coming through Columbia. We need that to not stop just right here, but to go all the way through to District 2. And that has to be a major priority. There's a specific amount that we will come to you with that I think that we need to begin and ask for homeless sheltering in Columbia. Dr. Bustles made mention of it a minute ago. I mean, we think there's a specific amount and a specific task that we want to identify that with you. It'll be a first time. I don't ever say one time. But it'll be a first time ask. And again, with our being the capital city, we house all government. I think it's an equitable thing that we need to ask for.
Councilman Taylor, Representative Rutherford expressed interest in working with the city on the homeless issue. So,
Well, perfect. I would like to ask you to take point on that, if you would, at a $9 million number with Representative Rutherford.
okay.
Thank you for bringing it up. And the last thing I wanted to mention
Like
is.
+5.
That's why I'm not.
What? I would have asked for way more.
You can get 9 for William Street. Homeless ought to be easy. And I don't see Mr. Shealy here today, but I think that, and Ms. Wilson, I'd ask you maybe to make some comments on this. My understanding is on the ARPA money for water and sewer, they've kind of capped it at $10 million or so a system. And frankly, that's just not equitable to the major cities in our state with these big systems.
Smaller systems they had their pool and they were capped at a lesser amount.
But theirs granted, a lot of theirs is granted out.
Yeah, but my point is simply this: a $10 million cap with the amount of ARPA money that's coming into this state on a system that's multi-jurisdictional. Now, remember that, multi-jurisdictional. It's not just the city of Columbia. It's the city, the county, Forest Acres, and we can name all the others. To be capped at $10 million is just, I just think that's just, unfortunately, and I got a lot of experience with these rural systems in the state, $10 million is not a fair amount to cap the city on. And I think a very good case can be made by y'all and the governor's office, because I believe most of that's coming through the executive branch, to raise that cap either on, and instead of looking at it as a flat dollar amount, maybe it's a cap based on how many customers you have in a system.
And one idea that has been kicked around is to get each jurisdiction that you affect to apply for the same.
And if that's the case, like I say, we need to know that so we can be in the game. Okay, but I mean, you follow where I'm coming from. A $10 million cap on that is just not fair.
I think some of those questions should be answered.
I was gonna say, he's on the working group, so he
That's
made a
fine.
lot of those pitches
I know,
you're
but
making.
I want to
so
make
I
sure
know they
that
need
the
to
fellows
hear
that
from
get
him.
paid to represent our interest over
Yeah.
there are fully aware of what we're looking for.
Yes.
On this thing, because I don't, they can get in the governor's office, they can get in Secretary Lightsey's office, but I don't know, I don't know if Clint can. So,
Okay.
and again, I think those are good ideas, Boyd, whether it's, $10 million cap per unit of local government within the system, but 10 million is just, that ain't equitable.
We have one or two to go. It's October the 18th. Second week in November, the legislature's going to come back. We're going to have a new Ways and Means chairman. We're going to have 5 additional new members on the committee. They will begin work immediately on putting their budget together. So we need your list of priorities with the backup documentation as soon as we can possibly get it, so that we can go to work on it. Because we have to we take it over there and we got to get the individual members to.
That's fine, Warren, but y'all get paid a lot more than any of us sitting at this table do. So you gotta lead the charge on that.
I don't think you want us setting your priorities.
No, but I'm saying you gotta work with us to organize, is what I'm saying.
We'll put it work, it's very if we have a working group to do this, we'll come to any meeting.
We got,
That's what I'm saying.
committee.
And so that takes us right into where I'd like to get clear instructions. So, and I think the lobbyists too, and we've talked about this going forward, because we didn't have the legislative committee before. Is that the will of the group and Mr. Mayor, your intention for, we take this discussion, these different priorities that have been articulated, and we now come to committee and kind of streamline and narrowly focus in? Okay. Yeah. All right. So we will make sure we get legislative committee set up with Mayor Rickaman, and is that the will of the council? I mean, as long as, I know all of you all have said a lot of things today, so.
I don't mind the
committee-
legislative committee being the quarterbacks for this thing, but they need to keep the other four of us informed.
Gather the information.
You three are the two. Can't do that.
you
can. Yes, you can. You can sit as a
We
public.
would be breaking the
No, you
freedom
won't.
of information.
No, you're not.
Public meeting.
Not when you're sitting at the table. As long as you're not
So,
sitting at the
in
table.
terms of process, we'll schedule a legislative committee meeting, and then the staff will kind of assist us in getting something together to get to them in terms of priorities. Okay.
Yes, I took copious notes, I think I did, and Madam Clerk always helps me out, so we'll make sure we get with the team ahead of your legislative committee. And then we'll work with you all to maybe prioritize these items that have been said today.
One comment I think, when we were having these discussions, Representative Bannister from Greenville, who's gonna be the new chairman of Ways and Means, was in charge of where a lot of this municipal money was going. And his philosophy then, and maybe it changed since April or May, his philosophy then was ask for everything because we're pulling different things from different pots of money where things fit. So don't be bashful about what you're asking for because they got pots of money they gotta use, with federal strings attached.
Has not been announced.
Inside information.
That is now public record.
So we.
It has not been announced. He's not official.
Until today.
It's a secret. Nobody tell anybody.
We don't make that decision.
You already know that.
So we'll make sure through the process now, you all, that we, as you said, there's the policy side of things. I heard a lot of policy type items, and there's the budget side of the house, and I definitely heard some budget related items, very specific items. We'll get that compiled together and come to legislative committee.
Catch and release is gonna be on.
Yeah, and I know that the sheriff and the chief and sheriff in Lexington and the regional mayors have all been discussing it. We're probably coming to the legislature as a group as well, supporting each other's priorities. So there's
Yes.
12 of us that meet on a regular basis.
Just on that note real fast, and this has been exceedingly helpful, thank you. But also, before we break up here, we should also note, Warren talked about catch and release. The University of South Carolina Board is gonna come back up again. That's gonna be part of the discussion.
There you go, Ed.
You're the
Get on the
board.
committee, Ed.
You want to get on the USC Board of Trustees?
Certificate of need is expected to be back up again. It went down right at the end of session and did not pass. That affects hospitals in our region. Hospitals in our region have different positions on the certificate of need bill. The S2, DHEC breakup, Chairman Peeler's priority, will be back up again. Drugs and crime, we talked about catch and release. Also, hate crimes will come back up. Interlock, drunk driving interlock legislation is being talked about. On the education.
Changing the drinking age to 18, I think that's coming up, my understanding.
Is it? I haven't heard anything about that. But that doesn't mean, this is just the
Beer
chatter
and
of what
wine.
people are talking about in the hallways right now.
Not that evil hard liquor.
Education savings account, possibly district open enrollment, which would affect us, wouldn't affect places like Charleston and Greenville so much. And then economic development, speaker's priorities, economic development.
Very nice.
Thank you all for your feedback and discussion. That's great.
Thanks. We added an item.
Thank you all
as an
so much.
amendment. Do you all need the item to have any further discussions regarding, no, that one's on, yes, sir, but, yeah, it was definitely on, but I think there was some discussion about having, are we good? Yeah, it did. I tried to make that happen for you.
Just a word of thanks, Mr. Mayor, to this team. Thank you all so very, very much. You all came to us with an agenda
You'll do both of them?
that was short. It was short, sweet, and complete. Thank you all so much. Boyd, Warren, Kyle, Ed, thank you all again for your continued leadership with
And
this
if you
city of
find
ours.
any
Thank you all.
committee positions out there,
I think the mayor wants a position.
I got a council member who.
Only those that come with a special license.
I want to thank you all very much. I'll be in touch. I want to thank
Thank you,
Juana.
Ms. Wilson, for
Juana.
calling the order.
Yes,
Thank you very
sir.
much.
And Juana always helps to be the glue to get everything together with them. And we're also very thankful for ACM Benjamin's assistance as well. So thank y'all. Can y'all confirm that date too as soon as possible so we can make sure it's on there, everyone's calendar? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we go into executive session for discussion of matters related to the proposed location, expansion or provision of services, encouraging location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by the public body pursuant to 30-4-70A5 project framework, discussion of negotiations and the proposed contractual arrangement pursuant to SC Code 30-4-70A2 legislative affairs.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Hearing no discussion, seeing none, Madam Clerk, can you read the roll?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Yes.